We did it! We made it to the finish line in Dark Deity. These are my final thoughts. Okay, just in case this is the first time you're hearing about the game, what is Dark Deity? Dark Deity is an indie tactical RPG developed by Sword and Axe LLC and published by Freedom Games. If you don't know what a tactical RPG is, it's kind of like a normal JRPG, except that the combat takes place on a grid where you move your characters around to get into position to attack and defend. The combat is typically slower, with a battle in Dark Deity typically lasting up to about an hour, or in some cases even longer, if you're slow like me. The TLDR is that this is a good entry into the genre if you like reading, but is definitely not on the level of games like Final Fantasy Tactics. Again, the game is made by a small indie studio, and this is their first game as a studio, if I'm not mistaken. So it would be incredible if they did compare to games like Final Fantasy Tactics. The story takes place in Terrazael, hope I'm saying that correctly, a world torn apart by oathbreakers, warmongers, and wielders of forbidden arcane secrets. A world on its last strand of hope, brought to its knees by a calamity centuries ago that tore down its mighty civilizations. Petty kings rule in place of grand emperors of old that wage fruitless, ill-advised wars, picking over ancient ruins like glorified scavengers. This game felt like a super linear tactical Suikoden to me. If you don't know what Suikoden is, it's an old JRPG and you're missing out. But that's okay. Here's the gist. You're a small army commander and you travel around fighting and recruiting people until you're ready for the final showdown against evil. I really don't want to say much more than that to avoid spoilers for people who haven't watched the series or played the game yet. The artwork is great. During story scenes, you get these really visually pleasing profiles of the characters. There aren't many animations, but again, this was made by a small studio and it's not really a problem for me. There is a ton of reading. If you don't like reading, this one isn't for you because there's no voice acting. The tactical combat is good for the most part. Positioning matters, teammates supporting each other matters, all the stuff you'd like to see in a tactical RPG. Ranged attacks only go for 2 or 3 tiles, and this felt really limiting in the beginning, but it becomes clear really quickly why it has to be that way. Ranged fighters would be way too strong if they could reach farther. They're already very strong. It never really became clear to me what type of classes or attacks counter other classes. I was told by a viewer that it wasn't about this class being stronger than that class, it's more about certain attack types being stronger against certain armor types, but the game doesn't really explain it. In most medieval fantasy games, you'd expect physical fighters to be weak against magic attacks and magic users to be weak against physical attacks, but that's not really the way it works, and I would be lying if I said I knew the why or the how. This is another one of those things that ends up just not being that important, though. My team did suffer some deaths because of my ignorance here, but it didn't prevent me from making progress and finishing the game. The one thing I was repeatedly missing, as far as combat goes, is the ability to perform an action and then move. The way the game works, you can move and then perform an action, such as attacking or healing, but you can't perform an action before moving. Performing an action just ends your turn. I was missing some other things as well. Animations for story events, I don't want to give too much away, but there's a scene where a character dies and the character's model just disappears. Not a big deal to me, but I did notice it, so I thought it was worth mentioning. The next few kind of go hand in hand. Random encounters, exploration, side quests, or at least some way to grind bonds and money. The reason I would want to be able to grind money is that when a character dies, they lose some stat points permanently, and that feels bad. But really, it ends up not being that big of a deal. You can afford to lose some points and still be strong enough to finish the game. And you can kind of cheese grind experience if you want to, so that's there for the people who want it. Again, you don't really need to grind to complete the story, but some of my characters did end up getting out-leveled so far that they were basically unplayable by the end. They would just die constantly if I put them in a battle, and then they lose some stat points, and so they just keep falling farther behind. The main thing about not being able to grind at all, for me, is that you just won't be able to get all of the bonds. The bonds are like relationships between your characters. As your bond level increases between two characters, you get a little bit more story for those characters. So I would have liked to have been able to max out all the bonds. I don't want to replay the entire 30+ hour game just to get those, though. Like I tend to say, so many games, so little time. And lastly, voice acting. Once again, the game was made by an indie studio. It probably wasn't possible for them at the time. From what I understand, the sequel game will be fully voice acted, so that's pretty nice. And that's coming out very soon, March 24th, so actually less than a week from when this goes live. So those are my final thoughts. Good game, really good for an indie, in my opinion. Not the best, but good. If you like tactical RPGs and you don't mind reading, you should definitely pick this up. And with the sequel just around the corner, the timing is right. All right, click the like if you liked the video and leave a comment telling everyone what your favorite tactical RPG is. Mine is Final Fantasy Tactics. I'll be starting to upload a new series soon, so if you're interested in seeing more of my content, subscribe to get the notifications. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.